I'm not usually the kind of person who scares easily. I grew up in rural Tennessee and spent most of my teens roaming the woods, camping whenever I could. Hiking was my escape, the one thing that always kept my head straight. But the Cherokee National Forest had a different kind of quiet to it, a heavy one that settled into your ribs if you were alone long enough. So when the six of us planned a day trip past an old service road, hauling way too much beer and way too little common sense, I already felt that small warning voice telling me we weren't respecting the place the way we should. We set out expecting nothing but fun, but things don't always stick to plans. I already had that sense in the back of my mind that the place demanded more respect than we were giving it. It was supposed to be fun. Me, my girlfriend Jamie, her best friend Tessa, and the three guys I'd known since freshman year, Brett, Cody, and Marcus. We were all 20 or 21, feeling invincible, and honestly just bored with campus life. Winter had finally eased up, and this was one of the first warm weekends of the year. We parked the trucks at a pull-off barely wide enough for both vehicles, then headed down the old trail with coolers strapped into our backpacks. The plan was simple: hike a few miles, find a good overlook, get day drunk, hike back before dark. But things don't always stick to plans. The first time we heard it, we thought it was another group of hikers. A branch snapped somewhere down the slope to our left, loud, like something heavy had stepped wrong. Brett immediately yelled, "Yo, we got company?" But no one answered back. Not voices, not footsteps, just the wind creeping through the pines. Jamie slipped her hand into mine. "I don't like that. Probably a deer," I said, though I didn't believe it. Deer don't sound like they're breaking shoulder-thick branches. A few minutes later, we caught our first glimpse. Just movement at first. Something big shifting behind a curtain of rhododendron, the dark leaves shaking. It walked parallel to us, matching our pace. We stopped. It stopped. Tessa whispered, "Is that a bear?" Her voice was already tight with fear. Cody did what Cody always did. Treated fear like a challenge. He started acting like he was dealing with a black bear, because yelling, waving your arms, and making noise is actually a viable way to deter one. Most of the time, black bears spook easily. "Hey!" he shouted, stomping into the brush and slapping branches with a stick. Go on!" Everything went still. Not quieter. Still. Whatever it was didn't run. Didn't even shift. It stood there, like it was waiting. After a few seconds, Cody backed away. "Weird-ass bear," he muttered. We pushed on, but the thing followed. It stayed just far enough out of sight that the guys could pretend nothing was wrong. But the girls knew. It was obvious they were scared. Hell, I was scared. Every few minutes, Jamie would glance over her shoulder. Every time she did, I felt my own skin crawl. At one point, I drifted ahead of the group without noticing. Not far, maybe 30 or 40 feet. But the moment I stepped around a bend, something moved in the brush right beside and slightly ahead of me. Heavy, slow, I froze. Whatever was tracking us came closer the moment I pulled ahead of the group. I heard it exhale, a deep rumbling sound, like a large animal trying to stay quiet. Then Jamie's voice snapped through the air. "Babe, don't go ahead. Stay with us." When I stepped back into view, the sound retreated, like it didn't want to be seen by the others. After another 15 minutes of walking, Jamie and Tessa were so rattled by the constant sound of branches shifting beside us that they finally refused to go any farther. They stopped dead in the middle of the trail, pale and shaking, insisting we turn back before whatever was following us decided to get bolder. The guys tried to brush it off at first, but even they were starting to glance over their shoulders more than they talked. Eventually, they agreed. Whatever was out there wasn't acting like any black bear, and none of us wanted to find out what it actually was. The walk back felt twice as long. No one spoke. Every now and then someone would stumble, a rock, a root, and the sudden noise would make all of us whip our heads around. It was behind us the entire time. Whenever someone drifted too far from the group, even a few steps, it closed the distance to that person. Not rushing, not charging, just moving, watching. And that was when it really sank in. This thing wasn't just following us. It was testing us, probing for weakness, waiting for someone to slip far enough from the group or droop to make a clean grab. The way it closed in whenever one of us drifted wasn't random. It was deliberate, predatory, smart in a way no bear or wild animal should be. That realization hit all of us at the same time, and I could feel the fear ripple through the group like static. We weren't dealing with a curious animal or a territorial creature. We were being hunted by something large that knew exactly what it was doing. We never saw its full shape, just hints of a hulking body ducking between tree trunks, fur brushing against saplings. Then we saw its head, just for a fraction of a second. Tessa gasped first, then Brett said, "Jesus Christ," and backed into Marcus. Just 10 feet off the trail, half hidden by dead branches, it stared out at us. Ugly doesn't even begin to cover it. It looked wrong in every possible way. Too long, too angled, like someone fused a wolf's skull with an ape's. The mouth was pulled back in a tight snarl, exposing teeth that didn't belong in a natural animal. And the eyes, dark, deep-set, intelligent. The moment we locked eyes with it, it slipped back into the brush without a sound. Tessa was crying now. Jamie wasn't far behind. "We're not going to make it back like this," Marcus whispered. "Then what?" I asked. He swallowed hard. "We have to divert its attention. Give it something else to follow." We stopped just long enough for everyone to drop their packs and start unloading everything that had a smell to it. All the food, snacks, even the leftover beer. We had sandwiches stuffed with deli meat, a couple of half-melted subs someone brought from town, and 3 or 4 packs of beef jerky we'd been tearing into all morning. The moment we piled all of it together on top of the backpacks, the smell hit us. Strong, salty, unmistakably meaty. Exactly the kind of thing a predator would zero in on. At least a normal one. "This better work," Brett muttered. "If it's hungry, it will," Marcus said. We stuffed everything into 2 of the backpacks, left them open, and placed them in the middle of the trail. Then we hauled ass toward the trucks, half jogging, checking over our shoulders every 2 seconds. About 30 yards out, we heard it crash through the underbrush, louder this time, purposeful, like it had been waiting for us to get far enough away before committing. Then came the sound of something tearing into nylon, vicious and fast, followed by a heavy thud as it threw one of the packs against the ground. The sheer force in those movements made all of us flinch. Marcus hissed, "Keep moving. Don't look back." But I did. I turned around. In hindsight, that was one of the dumbest things I've ever done in my life. I still can't explain what possessed me to turn back like that. Some mix of shock, fascination, and pure stupidity. Every therapist video on YouTube says prey animals freeze when their minds can't process danger, and I guess that's what happened to me. Because now I get panic attacks just driving past tree lines. Anytime I come anywhere near the woods, any woods, I feel that same cold spike of terror punch straight through my chest. I keep seeing that moment replay over and over again. Me turning around, alone, offering the thing the perfect chance to snatch me without anyone noticing. And then, almost seamlessly, like the world itself had pivoted while I wasn't ready, there it was, not hiding, not crouched, standing, on 2 legs, as if it had been waiting for me to look back, waiting for that exact moment when I'd be alone in my own head, separated just enough from the others to show me what had really been stalking us. A dark brown abomination hunched before me, its skin pulled so taut across bulging muscles that veins pulsed visibly beneath, like something flayed then reassembled wrong. Christ, those arms, hanging almost to the ground, each finger ending in a dark claw that could disembowel a man with a casual swipe. Its legs bent backward in sickening angles, coiled springs of raw power that could close the distance between us before my brain could even register movement. When it shifted its weight, the shoulders, too human, too familiar, rippled with strength that made my stomach turn. Muscle groups flexing independently beneath its hide like something alive and separate, writhing under its skin. And its head. God, The brief glimpse we'd seen before hadn't prepared me for the full thing. Even from this distance, I could see every horrible detail. Its head was a grotesque fusion of ape and wolf, the skull elongated, but still looking too short and wide, the teeth too long and uneven, like nature had tried to make something predatory and then kept adding parts just to make sure nothing could ever mistake it for a normal animal. Those eyes, those damn eyes, didn't just watch. They dissected me where I stood, calculating exactly how many seconds it would take to reach me, which parts would bleed most. When it tilted its head, something cracked audibly in its neck, and black saliva dripped between teeth that wouldn't fully close. This wasn't just a face that haunted dreams. It was the thing nightmares themselves feared, dragged screaming into our world through some crack in reality that should have stayed sealed. It had one of the backpacks clutched in its clawed hands, sniffing at it before tearing it apart like paper. When the food spilled out, it lowered itself onto all fours for a moment, but shifted upright again as if the posture didn't matter. Like it belonged in both shapes, I stood rooted to the ground, completely frozen. It wasn't just fear. Something about it fascinated me, dragged my mind into this weird trance. A werewolf, an actual physical werewolf existing in the same world I did. It didn't feel real. Evan! Jamie's voice didn't rip through the haze this time. It slipped into it. A sharp, breathless whisper right beside me. So close I hadn't even heard her approach. 1 second I was alone, frozen in place. The next, she was clutching my arm with both hands, fingers digging into my jacket, like she was afraid I'd get pulled into the dark. Evan, what are you? She followed my stare, and then she too froze. Her breath stuttered, catching halfway out of her chest. Her grip on my arm tightened until it hurt, but she didn't seem to notice. Her whole body went rigid, like she'd just walked straight into a nightmare she hadn't believed in until that second. Oh my God! Evan, it's... The creature's head snapped toward us so fast, it looked unnatural, like its neck was built on something stronger than bone. For one terrible, suspended moment, all three of us, me, Jamie, and that towering monster, just stared at each other across the torn-up trail. Its eyes locked onto ours, aware and calculating, and the air between us felt charged, like the woods themselves were holding their breath. Then its lips peeled back, slowly, revealing those jagged, uneven teeth in a snarl that vibrated straight through my spine. That was all it took. Jamie yanked on my arm, and we bolted after our friends, sprinting so hard my vision blurred. I kept expecting it to crash through the brush behind us, the way a normal predator might when prey suddenly bolts. Every muscle in my body was braced for that explosive charge, for the sound of branches snapping and claws gouging into the dirt behind us. But nothing came. Instead, it stayed with the food. We could hear it tearing into the packs with frantic ferocity, ripping fabric, tossing gear, snarling softly as it devoured anything that smelled remotely edible. The choice it made, that cold, calculated decision to go for the easy meal rather than chase us, only proved how terrifyingly intelligent it really was. It hadn't stopped because it lost interest. It had stopped because it knew it didn't need to run us down to survive. We didn't tell the others what we saw, not the full thing. Tessa was already close to a full panic. Marcus and Cody were trying hard to keep their egos intact. No way they'd believe we saw a werewolf if we just told them. So we just said, "It's going for the bait. Run." We made it back to the trucks without seeing it again. None of us talked much on the drive home. That night, after Jamie fell asleep, I sat in my room with the lights off and started looking things up. Not for monsters, for local wildlife sightings, weird reports, anything. That's when I found this tiny, half-forgotten article buried in a not-so-old forum. A school bus driver on a remote gravel road in Cherokee National Forest had been fired for scaring kids after a bunch of elementary schoolers claimed they saw a werewolf outside the bus window during a stop. The official report said the driver made it up to mess with the kids. They put it down to burnout and regular alcohol abuse. But the kids stuck to their story. All of them. Every detail I read matched the thing I'd seen. And now I'm sitting here in the dark, telling myself they were just overexcited children. But I know better. Those kids saw the same creature that watched us walk through the forest, and I can't stop thinking about how easily it could have taken any one of us, how close it came. My name is Norma Alvarez, and until a few months ago, I thought I had my life figured out. I am 37, a middle school English teacher, the kind of person who color codes lesson plans and remembers every student's birthday. People at work call me dependable, steady, and organized. But when David and I split, 12 years together unraveling in a matter of weeks, something inside me cracked in a way I couldn't fix with routine or self-help books. Nights became long, silent, and unbearable, and even my own apartment felt like it was shrinking around me. I rented the cabin in Cherokee National Forest because I needed to disappear for a while, just long enough to breathe without feeling like the walls of my life were closing in on me. My breakup with David had been ugly in ways I didn't expect. 12 years together, then suddenly I was living alone again, with half-packed boxes and a silence that felt radioactive. When a coworker mentioned that her cousin had a small cabin near the Tennessee-North Carolina border that he rarely used, I took it as a sign. I booked a week. I packed lightly. I didn't tell David. The cabin sat at the end of a narrow gravel road, surrounded by tall poplars and rhododendron thickets so dense they looked like walls. It wasn't remote enough to be dangerous, or so I thought, but remote enough for peace. During the day, the place felt gentle, quiet, almost therapeutic. I walked the trails around the ridge, journaled on the porch, tried to convince myself that solitude was something I wanted. My third night there, everything changed. It started with a howl that punched through my chest like a physical force, not some distant, romantic wail from movies. This was primal terror ripping through the night air. The sound hit with such violence that the cabin windows rattled in their frames, threatening to shatter. The howl built in layers, a guttural bass beneath a shrieking overtone that no natural creature should produce, as if something with a throat too large for this world had positioned its jaws inches from my door and unleashed hell itself. I froze mid-step. The cabin fell silent. Even the refrigerator hum seemed to pause. My first thought was a joke I'd once heard about coyotes sounding like demons. But this was certainly not a coyote. It wasn't a wolf either. I'd heard wolves at wildlife centers before. Another howl followed, even louder this time. My hands shook. I switched off the lamp without thinking. The sudden darkness made my heart thump so hard I felt it in my throat. I crept toward the window and looked outside. At first, I saw nothing but black forest, the faint outline of tree trunks, and shadows layered over shadows. Then something moved, a shape, massive and impossibly tall, at least 7 feet, moved between the trees with a fluid grace that defied its bulk. It walked upright on 2 legs but hunched forward, shoulders bunched like a predator ready to spring. The moonlight caught its eyes for a second, and my stomach dropped. They flared like 2 amber coins dipped in liquid fire, reflecting the light with an unnatural intensity that burned through the darkness. Not the soft glow of bioluminescence, but the predatory gleam of tapetum lucidum, that reflective layer behind animal retinas that makes cats and wolves into nighttime killers. I was completely frozen. This thing looked like it had stepped straight out of a nightmare. My breath was shallow, shaky. Every instinct screamed at me to hide. Not run, not breathe, just hide. The cabin was tiny, with few options. The only place that made sense was under the bed. My childhood fear of dark spaces vanished instantly under the weight of something much more real. I slid to the floor and crawled beneath the frame, pulling a blanket down with me to hide my shape. My cheek pressed to the cold wooden boards. I forced myself to breathe quietly. Outside, twigs snapped. Heavy steps circled the cabin. The creature exhaled, a low rumbling huff that carried through the cracks in the walls. The sound had heat behind it, like a large animal sniffing for scent. My body went rigid. Another howl erupted, this time so close it felt like the windows would burst. Then came the scratching, a slow drag of claws, long claws, across the outside wall. I pressed my hand over my mouth, terrified that any sound, even the faintest gasp, would draw it closer. The creature moved to the window opposite the bed. Its shadow blocked the moonlight. The entire room dimmed. I could hear it breathing. I turned my head just enough to see its outline in the glass, a distorted silhouette at first. Then, as it leaned closer, more details emerged. The muzzle was long, but not exactly wolf-like. Shorter, broader, with thick lips that curled back to reveal teeth far longer than any wolf should have. 3 inches at least, I guessed. The forehead bulged unnaturally, ridged with muscle beneath patchy fur that seemed to stretch over its skull like something wearing an ill-fitting costume of itself. Its fur looked patchy at the edges, as though the coat had grown over something that hadn't been built to wear fur in the first place. Pointy ears knifed upward, twitching at every sound I tried not to make. Then it lowered its head and peered inside. Its eyes caught the dim light again, reflective, chilling, intelligent. I was sure couldn't see me, but it sensed me, my scent, my breathing, my heartbeat. Something in those eyes searched the cabin like it was studying, evaluating, searching. My body shook so violently I had to clamp my hands over my ribs to keep them still. The creature lifted a hand, no, a paw, though the fingers were too long and too human, and pressed it against the glass. The claws were black and curved, easily 3 inches long. They tapped lightly, as though testing the strength of the pain. I swallowed a sob. If it broke in, I had nowhere to go, nothing to fight back with. It sniffed again, long and deep, the breath fogging the glass. And then, miraculously, it stepped back. Another deep, rumbling growl rolled through the walls, but it wasn't directed at the cabin. It sounded almost frustrated. It moved away, heavy steps receding toward the trees. Another howl tore through the night. This one angled up the ridge farther away. Then another, even farther. It wasn't leaving the area, just the cabin. And it kept howling, repeatedly, for hours. Each call was a little more distant, thank God, but still close enough that I never came out from under the bed. I stayed there until dawn, shaking under that blanket, my throat raw from silent crying. I left the next morning. I didn't bother cleaning up, making breakfast, or even changing out of my pajamas. I grabbed my bag, keys in hand, and drove down the gravel road so fast the car fishtailed. Every rustle in the trees made me flinch. Every shadow looked like something tall and wrong and watching. When I reached the main road and finally saw another car, I nearly cried again. Not from fear, but from sheer relief. I never told the cabin owner exactly what happened, just that I had to leave early. But I know what I saw. I know what stood outside that window, and I will never, ever go back to Cherokee National Forest alone again. Whatever is out there, whatever walked right up to that cabin, it wasn't a bear, and it wasn't human. It was a goddamn werewolf. I don't think it was hunting that night. If it had been, it wouldn't have announced itself with those earth-shaking howls. Predators don't warn their prey. The more I replay the night in my head, the more I believe it was doing something else, staking a claim, marking a new territory, or maybe searching for another one of its kind. The thought chills me even now, because whatever its reason, it walked right up to the only place in those woods with a light on and made sure I knew it was there. I heard it breathe. I saw its eyes. I saw its face. Some nights, when I'm alone and lying awake, I swear I can still hear that first howl, the one that shook the glass and froze me in place. I don't know if it was hunting me or warning me, but I survived. Barely, and I'll never forget it. I always told myself that solo camping was my way of keeping my head straight. Some people meditated, some people went to therapy. I just put 20 miles between myself and the nearest cell tower and slept in a nylon bubble under the trees. It worked for me. It always had. For years, I'd hiked, camped, and wandered through the southern Appalachians without so much as a close call with a bear or a copperhead. Cherokee National Forest was like a second home, quiet, old, steady, a place where the trees felt like they were watching over you. But that changed during my last trip. and it changed in a way I still have trouble believing when I talk about it out loud. Before I set foot on the trail, I remember standing next to my car at the Slick Rock trailhead, breathing in the quiet. My name's Ethan Carter, 32, office job, weekend backpacker, the kind of guy who fills notebooks with trail maps and gear lists because it makes me feel like I have some control over life. Cherokee had always been my escape, the place I trusted more than I trusted most people. The forest never lied. It never pretended. It just existed, steady and ancient, a place where I could let all the noise in my head settle. That's why I planned a 2-night loop along Slick Rock Creek Trail. Early April, mild temperatures, the kind of cool nights where the air feels clean enough to drink. I parked at the trailhead in the afternoon, shouldered my pack, and headed along the creek as the sun dipped behind the ridge. Water rushed loud enough to drown out everything else, and the old-growth tulip poplars formed a cathedral of straight columns overhead. I made camp near a bend in the creek, flat ground, soft needles, enough distance from the trail to feel private, but not reckless. The kind of campsite you find by instinct after a few years of doing this. That first night was peaceful enough. I made a small fire, cooked ramen, and watched the stars drift in and out of view behind the canopy. Nothing unusual, no weird noises, no sense of being watched, just the normal night chorus and the constant hiss of water over rock. The second night was different before it even began. I'd hiked hard that day. Steep climbs, muddy switchbacks, a couple of river crossings where I had to take my boots off and tiptoe across submerged rocks. By the time I reached my planned spot for night 2, farther up the drainage, my legs felt rubbery. I set up my tent, my lightweight 2-person dome I've used 100 times, crawled inside and ate jerky from a bag while listening to the creek. I remember thinking the forest sounded quiet, not silent, but subdued somehow, a little too still. I chalked it up to exhaustion, crawled into my sleeping bag, and drifted off. I woke up just after 2 o'clock to the sensation of something pressing into the side of my tent. At first, I didn't understand what I was feeling. It was like waking up to someone gently leaning a shoulder into your mattress. Subtle, but wrong. My brain tried to map the sensation onto something familiar. A deer brushing past, a branch falling, a bear sniffing around. But whatever pressed into the tent wasn't gentle. It was heavy. The nylon bowed inward nearly a foot, pushing toward my ribs. I froze, breath shallow, ears straining. Then I heard it. A long, wet exhale. Close, way too close for comfort. My blood went cold. The sound wasn't a snort or a huff. It wasn't bear-like at all. It was lower, wetter, like something clearing phlegm from a throat. I lay there, perfectly still, every muscle stiff, and the pressure increased. The tent pole on my left groaned as it flexed. That's when the silhouette appeared. A hand, at least something shaped like a hand, spread against the thin nylon. I could see the outline of thick digits far too long and narrow to belong to a bear. My heart slammed into my ribs, and then, slowly, each digit pressed harder against the tent wall. I knew exactly what I was looking at. I'd read the stories, the threads online, the hunter reports. Nobody took it seriously. The word people used, half as a joke, half as a warning, dogman. I never believed it, not really, but the shape of the hand pressed into the nylon matched what I'd seen described to the letter. I didn't have time to rationalize or doubt myself. Fear bypassed everything and went straight to instinct. My hand shot toward the pistol lying beside my sleeping bag. I always brought it when I camped alone. A Smith & Wesson M&P Shield Plus, loaded with Hornady critical defense rounds. I used to think of it as an overcautious habit. Right then, it felt like the only thing standing between me and a horrible death in this thing's jaws. I slid my fingers around the grip just as the hand outside shifted. The digits curled inward, and then I heard the nylon tearing. 5 black claws punched through the tent wall like a knife through tissue paper. They were long, curved, and spaced exactly like human fingers, just bigger, much bigger. I screamed. It wasn't a conscious decision. My body just yanked the air out of my lungs and turned it into a raw, terrified shout as the claws probed deeper into my shelter. Without aiming, without thinking, I raised the gun and pulled the trigger. The muzzle flash lit up the tent like a strobe. Bang! 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 Nylon shredded. The world exploded in sound. My ears went numb instantly. The creature outside reacted violently. It let out a scream of its own. A sound so loud and so wrong, I felt it in my sternum. It wasn't an animal's cry. It wasn't human either. It was both. It was neither. A high, ripping shriek that morphed into a deep-bellied roar as it stumbled backward. I fired again. Bang! Bang! 2 more shots tore through the fabric. One of them hit. I'm sure of that, because the creature's scream shot upward into a painful, mangled howl. The whole forest seemed to recoil. Branches snapped as something massive thrashed away from the tent. I heard it crash into a tree with a booming impact, followed by another scream, longer, more agonized. It wailed like something dying, or enraged, or both. I pressed myself into the corner of the tent, gun shaking in my hand, chest heaving. My ears rang so loudly that the world felt underwater. The creature moved away, staggering, growling, howling. I heard it retreat on 2 legs, heavy, uneven strides pounding through the brush. And then, after one last fading howl, the night went quiet. I sat awake until dawn, unable to close my eyes, unable to breathe deeply, barely able to move. Every minute felt like an hour. Every rustle sent a spike of adrenaline through me. When light finally broke across the ridge, I crawled out of the tent. What I saw confirmed everything. The nylon wall was shredded in 5 long slashes, each puncture wide enough to fit a finger through. The edges were stained with a dark, tar-like fluid, blood, or something like it. The ground around the tent was torn up with huge prints, humanoid, much too big to belong to anything known to live in these woods. My casings were scattered across my sleeping bag. I packed up and left in a daze, walking faster than I ever had with a full pack. I didn't stop for breaks. I didn't look back. When I reached the trailhead and saw my truck, I felt a wave of relief so intense I nearly collapsed. At the ranger station, I told the woman behind the counter that a bear had slashed my tent and that I'd fired at it in self-defense. She raised an eyebrow at the story, but didn't question it. People panic around bears sometimes. It's not unheard of, but I couldn't meet her eyes because I knew it wasn't a bear. It wasn't anything I'd ever wanted to see up close. And after that night, I'll never sleep in a tent alone again.